40 years ago, the wasteland was full of despots, slavers, raiders, tough-talking hoodlums with gangs who liked to kick around towns.
My expectations were already fairly high, but it still managed to obliterate them entirely. Alright, welcome back to Honored Madman, and we've got a special little video for you guys today. We're going to talk a little bit more about that Fallout series that I just finished watching, and man was it good. And I'm still kind of kicking myself in the head that I've still yet to get around to doing any Fallout lore videos despite the ideas just spilling from my head. That can always be remedied though, and it will. With this video, I'm just going to talk about a few things that I really like, what they did in the show, and a couple of things that I thought were kind of strange, but still were certainly interesting creative decisions. Overall, I thought the show was a hit. I give it a hands down like a 9 out of 10. I also want to say I'm committing right here and now to doing a series of videos, one on each episode of this show. I don't know when they're going to come out, probably within the coming weeks after the Aldia video. But if I publicly commit to doing it, then that means it'll get done. I'm planning on making them super in-depth, something like Glidus's Bliss Take series, the style I'm quite fond of. But those videos will start coming out in the coming weeks. I'm not sure how much editing they're going to have in them. I don't know how hardcore Amazon's going to go on the copyright thing with the clips. Probably nothing longer than 7 seconds. But anyway, let's talk about this Fallout show, shall we? So as I've probably mentioned before, I'm a pretty big fan of the Fallout series, and admittedly, I actually had pretty high hopes for this show. I know it was developed by the Westworld creators Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy. Now, I haven't watched all of Westworld, and I understand it was quite divisive, but what I have seen, I did really enjoy. And I've been a big fan of his screenwriting work. I liked Interstellar a lot. So I knew the show would be in good hands, and I later found out that the two people who are show running it are also pretty big fans of the game series as well. They both play the video games. So right off the rip, this show had a lot going for it, and on top of that, it had a stellar cast. And the cherry on top would have to be the musical stylings of Ramin Djawadi. I never in a million years would have thought I'd hear the guy who does the Game of Thrones music do a version of the Fallout music. Now that is something else. This guy always fucking kills it. And if you want to see some in-depth analysis on an extremely talented composer like Djawadi, then you should check out Glidus, because he did a whole video about the theme of Game of Thrones, and he often talks about how well this guy's music works with the scenes that they're used in. He was the perfect fit for this show. He absolutely kills it with how the music is done. Now, one thing I've always really loved about Fallout is its very unique aesthetic. It's retro-futuristic, like in the most bizarre of ways. It's the future that the 50s thought they were gonna have, essentially, but with more nuclear-powered shit. Now, I became a fan after playing Fallout 3 and then the masterpiece that was New Vegas, and later on I would play Fallout 1 and 2. Generally, I prefer 2 over 1, but 1 has a really great story. It's just a little bit harder to play than 2. That being said, I love all the games. Fallout 4 was okay too. It had some really good gameplay, but I wasn't really a big fan of the story. I think it had some pretty good side quests though, and a really good DLC in Far Harbor. But main story-wise, I much preferred Fallout New Vegas' open-ended approach, or even Fallout 3's coming-of-age story. They were both very, very satisfying stories to play. Anyway, though, look at me already getting sidetracked. But I think the aesthetic would have been the hardest part for them to nail, and they did nail it. The showrunners and the people who developed this show, Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan, completely got the source material. Sure, they might have made a few timeline changes, but nothing really that you can nitpick or get in too much of a fuss over. There's a good chance that this show might be in a separate continuity than the games, which makes sense as that would require the least amount of mental gymnastics making the timelines fit. But again, that's something I'll probably talk about more in the episodes that it was revealed in. Anyway, one thing I really enjoyed about this show was how they incorporated the classic tunes of Fallout and songs that were never in any of the Fallout games but fit right in with the Fallout playlist, if you will. New Vegas fans will probably be sad that there's no music from New Vegas in the game, but it looks like they're saving that for next season because, spoiler alert, just giving you a chance if you don't want to be spoiled, they show New Vegas at the very end of the series. Actually, it's like the final shot of the finale episode. And then again in the end credits, we straight up see the fabulous New Vegas sign. So I think there's a good chance we're going to hear a lot of the New Vegas music in the next season. I'm really only bummed that I didn't get to hear Butcher Pete from Fallout 3 or any of their little jazzy interludes like Fox Boggy. Those are like some of my favorite songs to hear in that game. But I'm sure we'll hear just about every Fallout song on this show before its run ends. Another thing that they pulled off exceedingly well was how they maintained the balance between covering and being faithful to the video games and adapting the world to the medium of television or, film. And a lot of times video game adaptations can go too far in one direction or the other. We all remember the Doom movie from way back in the day with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I need soldiers. I don't need anything else but soldiers. You know, that iconic line. That movie famously had a first-person sequence in it that you'll either love or absolutely hate. Another thing video game adaptations do is go too far in the other direction, making things too realistic. Obviously, they need to tone some video game-like features, such as mowing down hundreds of guys, to fit into a television adaptation, but it almost feels that a lot of video game adaptations, or at least the people running them, are sort of ashamed of the origin of the product. They feel the need to go above and beyond in making it appeal to people who didn't play video games, which isn't always the best, choice. It's actually often the wrong choice. But honestly, this show managed to find the perfect balance, like how when you're damaged or wounded, the stim pack heals you up, but you still have a wound that needs to be sewed up. Ghouls are healed by their mutant and radioactive nature, which is another thing I wanted to talk about. There's a lot of focus on ghouls in this season, which is something I love because ghouls are one of my favorite parts about the Fallout universe. I've been working on a video about it, which I really should have finished before the show came out, but alas, the best laid plans and all that. So obviously one of the main characters is a ghoul, Cooper Howard. I've even got this sick little figure of him, and we learn a lot about what being a ghoul is like through his eyes. And obviously there's much more to his character than just being the ghoul, because he's got this really intricate backstory. But through him they're able to do a good amount of world building with how ghouls work, at least within the context of this series. You see, it appears ghouls in this universe, or at least the continuity of the show, they are destined to go feral, which is something I'm going to talk about in my ghoul video, whether or not all ghouls are destined to go feral or not. It appears though that in the show every ghoul will eventually start showing signs of going feral, which will lead to them forming a dependence on what I believe is Radaway. Now I actually think that's really interesting. That's a good compromise between the two schools of thought, that not all ghouls go feral and that all ghouls go feral. It's definitely something I liked, and I'm really glad I didn't make my ghoul video before this show came out, because it would have been, lacking an important section. Anyway, though, I think the biggest thing about this show that really just made me fall in love with it is its use of the classic Fallout music and how they go together with some of the various scenes and montages we get throughout this beautiful show. Now, most if not all the songs are from Fallout 3 and some are from Fallout 4, but there weren't any from New Vegas, and I can only assume that's because they're saving those for next season, judging by that massive cliffhanger we got. But I don't think I can convey in words just how burned into my brain some of these songs are from the long nights playing Fallout 3 when I was like 12 or 13. You know, staying up all night when I had school the next day when Point Lookout came out, just because it was just such an interesting DLC. And throughout the many playthroughs of Fallout 3 I had, I was always listening to Galaxy News Radio, so stuff like Butcher Pete, I'm Tickled Pink, the Into Each Life song, every single Inkspot song ever made because of Fallout and Better Call Saul, they're all burned into my brain. And the way they're used in the show shows such a care and a love for the source material that I honestly was blown away by it, how good it worked. And again, just how the basic feel and the various, quirkiness of the games, it's captured in every scene, and it translated so well. Like, it blows me the fuck away. Obviously, a lot of people were really big fans of The Last of Us adaptation. I thought it was pretty good too. I don't have a big personal connection with The Last of Us franchise like so many others do though, and I also think that it's a much more safer video game to adapt. I mean, the game itself is already sort of like Children of Men with mushroom zombies. It basically already was an interactive movie. Now, I'm not discrediting it in any way. It's something, it's a good story, the first game at least. And I'm not discounting the adaptation, especially that finale. It was powerful stuff. I enjoyed it. But I do think it's less of an accomplishment to ace doing the Last of Us adaptation as opposed to acing doing the Fallout one, because the Fallout one is a lot harder to get right. And not only that, they aren't adapting the story of any of the video games, they were adapting their own unique story to fit the show, and all of the characters benefited from that. None of them were being compared to, the various iconic characters that happen in the Fallout universe. There's no judgment on how accurately characters are portrayed, because they're not characters who existed in the franchise before. They're original characters who all fit so well into this world, you would think that they were in the video games. But the people we owe all of our gratitude are the two showrunners, Graham Wagner and Geneva Robertson Dworet. I hope I'm saying her last name wrong. But these two credits to the screenwriting community are huge fans of the Fallout universe. They're lifelong enjoyers of the games. Graham Wagner even played Fallout 1 when it came out. So, we can't say that it isn't coming from a place of love or understanding of the games. These two worked with Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan, these showrunners of Westworld, and they created this beautiful show, Fallout. I believe it was developed by Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan, and then Graham Wagner and Geneva Robertson Dworet took over as the showrunners, while I believe Jonathan Nolan wrote and directed some episodes. But this show is made by people who have a love for the video games. And speaking of that, my love for the Fallout franchise after Fallout 76 was probably at an all-time low. Because I don't know if you remember, they made this whole big thing, they have this huge Fallout-related announcement, get ready guys, who knows what it could be. It could be the next Fallout, it could be a remaster of 3 or New Vegas. But what did we get? We got a half-assed Fallout MMO based in the same model as, or in the same engine as Fallout 4. And yeah, in present day, the game's sort of like No Man's Sky in that it's come a long way. I would still say that No Man's Sky is still infinitely more playable than Fallout 76. But the point I'm trying to make is my love for the Fallout series had been soured. It also made me look at 4 rather unfavorably because in my eyes it didn't live up to 3 or New Vegas, which is probably the truth. There's a lot of stuff about 4 that I really did like, and I think that calling it the weakest of the 3 Fallout games that most people have played is a bit reductive, but it's something I understand. I will say that I do find it more enjoyable than Skyrim, though, that's for sure. If I had to rank Bethesda games, it would probably have to go like Morrowind, Oblivion, Fallout 3, Fallout 4, something like that. Can't really rank Starfield, seeing as how it's not playable on my PC. Who knows why. My thing can run just about everything else. Elden Ring, it runs Fallout 4, which is basically the same game as Starfield, but again, that's a whole other story. And I honestly think I would tie Oblivion and Fallout 3 in those rankings. I just like Morrowind a little bit more because of just nostalgia and whatnot. And obviously I can't rank New Vegas in there because Bethesda didn't develop it. That was Obsidian, and obviously that's the best Fallout game in my opinion, but that doesn't mean I think Fallout 3 is shit or something. I think Fallout 3 is just marginally not better than New Vegas. To me, they're both very solid and replayable games. Yeah, 3 is never going to live up to New Vegas, but it comes pretty close. Plus, it's got Point Lookout, which is probably my second favorite Fallout DLC of all time. Far Harbor is also really cool too. See, now I'm getting off topic though. We're supposed to be talking about the show. One thing that it did that I really liked is it did many things that the games do, but differently, almost as if to pay homage to those things that happen in the games. My favorite of which is how the origin of Dogmeat in the show closely resembles that of the story of Edie or Eddie from Fallout New Vegas. And I won't go out of my way to spoil it, but it's nice to know that there were at least 2 good Enclave scientists. And the show's filled with little references and homages like this. For example, when Lucy says to Maximus that her father would be heartbroken if she had to level a settlement to save him, that's a nice callback to Liam Neeson harshly judging you if you blew up Megaton. The irony, though, is that Lucy's father did blow up an entire settlement to save her, but I'll probably talk about that a little bit in the cliffhanger video I'm planning on making tomorrow. And there's probably going to be countless YouTube videos from other more Fallout-themed channels that will cover all the Easter eggs. But one I really liked was that there's the Ma June character who's played by Patty the Daytime Hooker from My Name is Earl. And she was contracted to provide safe passage for the Enclave defector Siggy Wilzig. But curiously enough, on her book, on her little ledger, there's a Followers of the Apocalypse sigil. Now, we don't get many mentions of them at all, and the last time we heard about them in New Vegas, most of the endings had them not doing too well, but there's a couple where they sort of thrive, at least I think. But I think it's safe to say that there are still some of the followers around, but they seem to be in hiding or a much smaller organization than they were before because, they did rely on the NCR for their subsidies, supplies, and funding. And with the NCR gone, that means they probably had to turn to other people to find these resources or, they don't exist anymore. Another thing I think people are going to really enjoy talking about is the boardroom scene. So at one point, Walton Goggins is listening in on a meeting between Vault-Tec and other corporation owners, people like Robert House, Frederick Sinclair, those type of guys. A couple of other people who are mentioned in terminal entries in Fallout 1 and New Vegas are also present at the meeting, but the biggest takeaway is that Vault-Tec apparently caused the bombs to fall. Now that opens up the floodgates for various other theories regarding Robert House and if he's still alive and if the events of New Vegas happened in some form. I mean, it's going to be vastly different than probably most of everybody else's playthrough because they're going to have to come up with some story, some definitive story for what happened in Vegas. They could probably leave it ambiguous in some way, but that is something that it seems like they're going to contend with next season. So I probably shouldn't speculate too hard on that. Plus, I'm going to do a whole cliffhanger video, I keep saying. Anyway. The show also goes out of its way to provide an explanation for the T-60 armor and why the T-45 was so quickly replaced. Now, one thing I'm confused by is that there's literally no mention of the T-51 armor. It's a small nitpick to be sure, but we know they were used in the war in Alaska. We saw it. We were there in Operation Anchorage. We've seen the beginning of Fallout 1, which begins with the Fallout universe's version of an Army Strong commercial that shows a T-51B power-armored soldier executing a surrendering Chinese. Plus, the suit is basically the poster boy for the first Fallout game. It just seems strange that we didn't hear any mention of the T-51Bs. I know that they were supposed to be possibly prototypes, but I don't know, a lot of people are talking about Fallout New Vegas erasure, and I haven't really seen any proof of that yet. We'll talk about that too next, but I think the only thing that's been erased so far is the T-51B armor, and that seems to be something that the games are doing as well. But let's talk about that supposed erasure, I guess. So a lot of people are up in arms because there's this chalkboard in Vault 4. It has a basic timeline of events that depict the history of the NCR, but when it gets up to 2277, it has another arrow that points to just their nuclear destruction. Now that's led some to believe that the events of Fallout New Vegas didn't happen because they took place in 2281. Now I think there's many explanations for this, the first of which being that it's on a chalkboard in a classroom. The kid could have just gotten their presentation wrong. Another is that the remnants of the NCR recognized 2277 as the beginning of the end for their former country, which would kind of line up with Fallout New Vegas because that's the same year that they began their campaign in the Mojave, something that could potentially, within the events of the game, lead to their eventual collapse, or at the very least their failure to annex Vegas. But yeah, from what I can tell, that little lore discrepancy is causing a bit of uproar. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal at all. I mean, they were never going to be able to fully canonize everything that happened in New Vegas. They're going to definitely canonize some version of the New Vegas storyline. It's such a small nitpick to have when everything else in the show is just so high quality. As a lore man, though, I do understand some people's concern, and when I saw the 2277 on the chalkboard, I was a little confused myself. But again, there's numerous possible explanations for that, and the truth is we won't really know the finer details of it until Season 2 comes out. So far, though, outside of that, the show fits really nicely in the continuity of the games. Again, there's a few minor changes, like the location of Shady Sands being closer to LA than it was in Fallout 1, and the ghouls needing to take Rat away, stuff like that, minor changes, but that can fit within the world of the games as well, as far as I'm concerned. I'm just really impressed with all aspects of this show. The cast fucking knocked it out of the park. Ella Purnell killed it as Lucy. She was like the perfect clean as a whistle vault dweller character who we slowly watch get dirtied by the wasteland, if you will, and she never really compromises her morals either, which is interesting because, you know, it shows that Vault Tech, it was such an evil and twisted corporation, but the values it instilled in some of the average Vault Dwellers are actually quite good. And yeah, those values do often serve to just get Vault Dwellers killed when they go topside, but it's nice to see the classic Vault Dweller protagonist translated so well onto screen. And obviously Walton Goggins, he fucking kills it with his extremely layered and badass performance as the Ghoul, Cooper Howard. It goes without saying that this character will probably be loved by just about everybody. I mean, how could you not? Ass jerky ain't gonna make itself. But perhaps the person I was most impressed by, because I'd only seen them in like one other thing, was Aaron Moten, the actor who plays Maximus. I've only seen this guy in Disjointed. I think that's the only thing, and I wasn't a big fan of that show. I mean, you'd think, you know, Otter Madman, he's a weed guy. He loves that kind of stuff, but, you know, it comes down to this. I hate laugh tracks, and that show had an egregious one, and if that wasn't bad enough, the writing of it wasn't too good either, and I'm not trying to hate on it because I really liked this actor, Aaron Moten's work in Fallout, and he was good in that too, but he absolutely delivers in his performance as this character Maximus, this conflicted, sort of cynical, self-preservationist member of the Brotherhood of Steel. Some of the values of the Brotherhood have been instilled in Maximus, but he's still very much an individual. This likely stems from him being a survivor of the destruction of Shady Sands. So he's actually a refugee of the New California Republic who joined into the Brotherhood. Not like he had much to say in the matter since he was found as a kid, but you get what I mean. But he is a hilarious character, and he really does a lot of world building for what the Brotherhood's like in the current timeline. They're apparently very sheltered and not taught much about their own anatomy, which I found to be really funny. And it kind of adds up. I mean, that's kind of like a thing knights are like they're all chivalrous and they don't like to talk about sex and stuff like that. They're okay with slaughtering dozens and dozens of people, but if you talk about sex, can't really talk about that. That's, unbecoming of a knight. Very funny how the Brotherhood operates. Again, though, the supporting cast also kills it as well. Johnny Pemberton fucking plays this squire, another member of the Brotherhood. He's sort of like a rival, sort of, to Maximus's character. But he's fucking hilarious. He kills it in this role. I've only ever seen this guy play kids, so it's nice to see he's finally playing an adult. And I think I already talked about Michael Emerson's character, Wilzig, the guy who, he saved Dogmeat from the incinerator because Dogmeat was underweight and he was supposed to be exterminated, but Wilzig formed his weight and kept him as his own personal pet. He was a truly enigmatic character. We still know very little about him, despite him being so central to the plot of Season 1. I really wish he would have stuck around for more episodes, but there's a good chance we'll probably see him again in a flashback or something, at least I hope. I've always been a fan of Michael Emerson. He absolutely killed it as Ben Linus. I started off hating him and ended up loving him. In my opinion, Lost is worth watching simply for his arc alone. He basically carried the last season, in my opinion. There's a lot of wacky choices that were made in Lost's final season, but Michael Emerson's character's arc was excellent. And it was just really nice to see him again. And he really looks the part of mysterious Enclave defector with a heart of gold. He conveys it so perfectly. He feels very reminiscent of some of the more friendly Enclave remnants that you encounter in New Vegas, but he also shares several similarities with James, the father of the protagonist of Fallout 3, who I've always believed to be an Enclave defector, but it's left sort of ambiguous. I mean, he spots the Enclave and identifies them immediately. He distrusts the Brotherhood. He's got an amazing education. It just really seems like Project Purity was something he was working on in secret at the Enclave, and they got mad at him, and now they're trying to steal his project for themselves. You know, after he defected, which, I mean, they probably view the project was always theirs in the first place, but you get my meaning. Wilzig in the show was secretly working on Cold Fusion, and I guess secretly kept Dogmeat as his personal dog. It seemed like they didn't mind him carrying Dogmeat in and out of his lab and all throughout the various checkpoints we see them going through. It's all left sort of vague, I guess. But there is one interesting thing about this character that I forgot to mention, that his name, Siggy Wilzig, there's a real person who existed who had that name. Now, I'm not saying they're the same person, but perhaps this Siggy Wilzig is a descendant of the real-life one, at least in the continuity of Fallout. The real-life Siggy Wilzig was born in 1926 and lived all the way until 2003, and by the time of his death, he was a billionaire. He'd created an oil empire that was worth more than $4 billion in assets. He was an extremely powerful figure by the time of his death. So perhaps this Siggy Wilzig character in the show is a descendant of the real-life one, and perhaps the Fallout version of the real-life Siggy Wilzig was involved with the Enclave in some way. I mean, it wouldn't be too much of a reach. He was a billionaire oil baron, so I think it lines up. I mean, there's so many theories to run with that, or his name is simply just an homage. It's really tough to say. Also, literally all of the supporting cast absolutely fucking killed it. The actress who played Moldaver, the one who played Steph. I also really liked Lucy's brother Norm and his investigation into the whole mystery of the abandoned vault. It was like a Vault Noir conspiracy theory, except no one was smoking cigarettes or wearing suits or anything like that. They're all wearing jumpsuits, but it very much conveyed the feel while also staying true to the games and having this, sinister mystery unfold in a vault. And then having to slowly unravel it. But yeah, there isn't a single member of the supporting cast that I have any issues with. They all fucking killed it. I've already gone over the top to say how good Kyle MacLachlan was in this role, and they used him to his full potential as both lovable dad and good guy and a twisted villain. He's capable of both, he thrives in both type of roles, and they gave him a character that had to do both, and that's just, you can't ask for more than that. I'm a big fan of the guy's work, and he fucking bring his A game as he always does. Oh, and of course, Dogmeat. He was so perfectly captured in this. He was, at one point or another, a companion to nearly all of the central characters, and some of the non-central ones. And he really did his own thing. He had a mind of his own, and that dog actor fucking killed it. There's not much else I can say. I'm just really happy with how Dogmeat got his origin story, and he was portrayed expertly all in one miniseries. Or one season, I should say. This is not a miniseries, this is only season 1. I really can't wait to see what happens next with all these characters. Anyways, there's plenty of other great cameos, like Fred Armisen from Portlandia. He absolutely kills it in a character that feels straight out of Portlandia, but also feels perfectly fitting in the world of Fallout. He, of course, runs a music station where they just play fiddle, the original recordings, on a loop endlessly. I think the funniest was Eric Estrada playing the former Desert Ranger, at least I think that's what he was. He might have just been a scavenger, but we see these two guys wearing Desert Ranger using metal detectors, and Walton Goggins kills the dude's son. Eric Estrada is the one he leaves alive. And he mentions having some of the dude's lead still in him, so I'm guessing they crossed paths before, and Eric Estrada shot Walton Goggins at some point. Anyway, though, I felt like that was a really funny little cameo, especially after having just rewatched My Name is Earl and seeing the whole Estrada or Nada arc. I also really liked their use of the mutant creatures. The depiction of feral ghouls was excellent. Same with the Yao Guai. I thought it looked extremely menacing, and it's the Fallout 4 design, which I wasn't a big fan of originally, but I've come around on it. I still like the hyena-looking ones in Fallout 3, but I think that there's room for for two different kinds, for the Fallout 4 one and the Fallout 3 one. And I think the Fallout 4 one does a better job of conveying that it's a mutant bear than the Fallout 3 version, but maybe that's just me. I like that they were sparing, though, that they didn't show us too many of the different iconic mutant creatures that we're used to. We saw the rad roaches, we saw a gulper, which was interesting. Those were, I believe, only in Far Harbor. We actually saw a couple gulpers, and I really liked the added detail of them having fingers for teeth. That's the one thing that threw me off when I saw it in the trailer. I had no idea what it was. I definitely didn't think it was any monster we'd seen before, but lo and behold, it was a gulper. And I think they did a great job with it. They even made it weirder than gulpers usually are by giving it the whole finger teeth thing. That was just perfect, I think. And they also alluded to several creatures that they didn't outright show us. Like at the end, they show us a Deathclaw skull. Very ominous, foreboding, and foreshadowing probably to us seeing one in Season 2. We also saw for a brief moment what I believe to be a hand of a super mutant. And we only saw the hand because the rest of the body was obscured. There was a blanket, a sheet covering it. And that was, of course, at the Enclave base of operations that Wilzig defected from. And we know the Enclave love their FEV, so this seems right in line with them, even though they aren't the original makers of the super mutants. But by this point, there's been several different makers of super mutants in the various games. There's the mutants of the Master's Army, the first gens who are intelligent, and the second gens who are pretty dim-witted. There's also the Nightkin, who have an addiction to stealth boys. Then there's the Capital Wasteland mutants who emerged from Vault 86, or is it 87? I can't remember. But the Vault's whole secret experiment was to mess around with FEV on its inhabitants, and it created the super mutants. Then there was the slightly different super mutants who were developed by the FEV research wing of the Institute in Fallout 4, and again, there's all these different super mutants, and the ones that are being developed in the show might be yet another new type of super mutant, but I do think it's definitely a bit of a subtle foreshadowing to a creature we might see in a future season. What else, though? I really liked how they portrayed the Brotherhood, the inner politics and workings of it. It almost felt a little bit like the Empire as depicted in the hit series Andor. Obviously not as outwardly sinister, but a little bit. And there's definitely a good amount of incompetence in their ranks and fear, and they're just ultimately super misguided, and I really like that aspect because that's how they're supposed to be. Now, what I don't understand is if Maxon's Eastern Brotherhood has come back and reconnected with the Western Brotherhood, and that's the Brotherhood we're seeing, or is this just what's left of the Western one after their war with the NCR, etc. The airship seems to suggest that it's Maxon's East Coast Brotherhood having rejoined with the Western one, but the airship, to my knowledge, is never referred to as the Prydwen, so it could just be another airship that the West Coast Brotherhood has. It doesn't really say. It's never really ultimately clear. I really liked the dynamic between the Squire and the Knight that they're heavily emphasizing in the first couple episodes, and how expendable the Squires are. The main character, Maximus, does the morally questionable, but in my opinion, right thing to let Michael Rappaport die because he's such a fucking asshole, and then impersonate him. And when he radios back to base pretending to be Knight Titus, he mentions he lost his squire and that he died bravely, and the command doesn't seem to care all that much. They're basically just like, oh, it's no big deal, we'll get you another squire. We got no shortage of those guys. And I think even Jonathan Nolan said in one of the interviews or something related to the press for Fallout that was his intent. He really wanted to focus on how these squires were extremely expendable, and if they didn't prove their worth, they were forgotten about and cast aside fast. The knights were the important ones. The squires were basically nobodies. They were, cannon fodder. If they were lucky, they survived enough battles to become a knight, and if they were competent, of course, but usually just luck was all that played into it. Which is how I'm assuming Michael Rappaport became a knight. That I guess I answered my own question there, didn't I? Such a great casting choice, casting someone so easily hateable as an extremely hateable character. Perfect. Great work, guys. And again, there's probably countless things that I want to mention that I'm forgetting, so I think the best way for me to go about this is to make the whole uber in-depth analysis videos on each episode that I'm planning to do, but there will probably be a couple of smaller ones about like the factions or well, I'm definitely doing one about that cliffhanger ending. So expect some Fallout coverage, but also expect some Elden Ring lore coverage because I've got two smaller videos that are just about done, and I think you guys are going to enjoy them quite a bit. This was only just meant to be like my rant reaction video and talking about the things I like with spoilers because I can't seem to stop myself from saying spoilers. Yeah, I just wanted to rant a little bit about the show and all the things I could think of off the top of my head that I liked about it or found interesting. I probably still, again, forgot various things I wanted to bring up, but that's what the future videos are for. But I feel like I've rambled enough nonsensically. Let's have our outro and then the final thoughts, shall we? Overall, I'm just really happy this show turned out to be so good. Like I said, I had pretty high expectations for it, and they still managed to exceed them and knock them out of the park. And not only that, though, they ended with a total flourish. They hinted at New Vegas being in next season. I don't know about you guys, but Fallout New Vegas is probably one of my favorite video games of all time. It's right up there with Twilight Princess. It's right up there with the Dark Souls trilogy plus Bloodborne. I find it impossible to rank them separately. You know, they take up one slot in my rankings, which aren't ordered, by the way. That's just also too difficult because I like different games for different things. And you know, other games that would round that out would have to be like Dragon Age Origins, which I fucking love, or Oblivion, which I think you guys already know that I love. Earthbound would be another one that I wouldn't be able to not name because I fucking love that game too. But if I had to pick one out of all those, it would probably either be New Vegas or Earthbound or Twilight Princess. It would come down to those three, and I would have to, you know, rack my brain and rip my eyeballs out over it. But anyway, we've got a lot of good stuff coming in the future weeks. We've got that anticipated Aldia video and a couple of other smaller Elden Ring videos about some more obscure lore tidbits. And again, I got some Fallout lore videos planned, like about the ghouls, about the dad from Fallout 3 and his mysterious origins. I got a lot of good stuff planned, and I've got all the footage I need for the Fallout 3 stuff, and I'm working through New Vegas again. It's just like a bike. You never really forget. Anyways, though, guys, let me know what you guys thought of the Fallout series. If you've seen it in the comments, let me know what you guys, what's your favorite Fallout game. Anyway, though, I will be seeing you guys real soon. As always, be safe.
Got what you